As you age and struggle to care for yourself, ask yourself this one question before moving into a nursing home. Is this the way you want to live your final years, or is there another way? The thought hangs in the air. It lingers, unanswered, as you look at the future that stretches ahead. The future where decisions about your life, your care, are no longer yours to make. You can see it clearly, the constant reliance on others. The fear of losing the very essence of what you've spent years building, your independence, your freedom. But then, you ask yourself that one question: is there another way? You don't want to think about it, but it's right there, pushing its way into your mind. And you can't help but wonder, could there be another path? Now, think about this: Helen, John, Sarah, and Eleanor. Each of them is facing this same daunting question in different ways. They all carry the weight of aging with grace but also with fear. Each one is wondering if they will have to give up their lives as they know it, just to grow old. But none of them is ready to simply give in to the inevitable. They want control. They want to hold on to their choices. But will they? Let's begin with Helen. At 75, she's already started facing the reality of her declining mobility. The days of running errands on her own are behind her. She struggles to stand for long periods, to walk even short distances, and it frightens her. But what frightens her more than her aching knees or the constant fatigue, is the thought of giving up her home. Helen fears losing control over the smallest of things. She's not sure she's ready for that. The idea of a nursing home? That seems like giving up. The fear creeps in: will she be left to live like a stranger in a place where she's just another face in a crowd? Then there's John. At 80, he's proud. Proud of the life he's lived and the man he's become. But his body is starting to betray him. His back aches, his legs get weak, and even something as simple as getting out of bed takes a toll. But John refuses to be treated like an old man, confined to a nursing home. No, not him. He wants to stay at home, in his own space. His children want him to move into a facility where he can get 24/7 care, but he resists. He doesn't want to lose his autonomy, even if it means struggling more than he'd like. But how long can he go on pretending that he doesn't need help? How long can he avoid the inevitable? Sarah is 78. She's lost a lot in her life, but the biggest loss is something she didn't expect: loneliness. Since her husband passed, she's spent more time alone than she'd like to admit. She tries to keep herself busy with hobbies, but nothing quite fills the void. Her children call, but they live far away, and the visits are few and far between. Sarah often wonders if her family will eventually send her to a nursing home, where she'll be surrounded by strangers. The thought makes her stomach turn. But if she stays alone, she feels that the loneliness might consume her. What's the better option? And then we have Eleanor. At 72, she's vibrant, energetic, and eager to stay active. She has a sharp mind and a keen interest in technology. But even with all her energy, the reality of aging is starting to catch up. The pressure to keep up with younger people is exhausting. She feels like the world is moving on without her, and it's hard to keep up. Aging isn't just about the physical changes, it's the pressure to remain relevant, to stay engaged, to stay young in a world that doesn't cater to people her age. The idea of a nursing home? It's almost a fate she refuses to accept. But she's beginning to realize that she can't keep pretending that she's immune to time. How does she stay engaged, active, and independent, while also accepting the changes that come with aging? They each have their own struggles. They face different battles, but at the core, they all share the same dilemma: how to keep their independence as they grow older. Should they accept the inevitable and give in to the system that provides care but takes away their freedom? Or is there another way? Now let's talk about the nursing home. The idea of a nursing home can seem like the easy solution. It's a place where care is provided, where help is available around the clock, where there's a structured routine. But is it really the best choice for everyone? Is it worth the loss of personal freedom, the loss of control over your daily life? For Helen, the thought of being in a nursing home feels like an erasure of everything she's worked for. She pictures herself in a sterile room, her life reduced to schedules, orders, and rules. She wouldn't be able to just decide when to wake up, when to eat, or even when to go for a walk. She would no longer have the freedom to choose the smallest of things, her meals, her time, her space. She imagines herself as a number in a system. She can't imagine herself thriving in such a place, not after all the years she spent making her own choices. And what about John? As he thinks about the possibility of a nursing home, his chest tightens. The thought of relying on others for his basic needs is a blow to his pride. John spent his entire life providing for himself, for his family. To think that he could be reduced to needing someone to tie his shoes, help him in the bathroom, or feed him is almost too much to bear. He knows that his physical limitations are becoming harder to ignore, but the idea of surrendering his independence feels worse than the physical pain he's enduring. He's never been one to ask for help, but could he really keep pushing this away, forever? For Sarah, the idea of moving into a nursing home is equally terrifying, but in a different way. She envisions herself in a place where she's surrounded by strangers. The thought of being so far from her family, of seeing her loved ones only once in a while, makes her feel abandoned. In the nursing home, she might have company, but it won't be the kind of company she craves. It will be fleeting, impersonal, and often uncomfortable. She imagines herself fading into the background, forgotten by the people she cares about most. The isolation in a nursing home could be worse than the loneliness she feels now. For Eleanor, the reality of a nursing home represents a loss of identity. She's always been someone who is active, who engages with technology, who participates in her community. The thought of becoming dependent on others, of losing the ability to go online, to chat with people, to make decisions for herself, feels like the end of her autonomy. She's not ready to be treated like an elderly woman in need of constant assistance. But as time passes, the reality of aging sets in. How much longer can she keep pretending that she can do it all? The nursing home offers care, but at what cost? It promises assistance, but at the price of control. The very thing that each of these individuals holds dear, whether it's Helen's independence, John's pride, Sarah's connection to family, or Eleanor's sense of relevance, will be slowly stripped away. A nursing home may provide the physical care they need, but it takes away something more precious, the ability to live life on their own terms. And so, they ask themselves, is there another way? Is there a way to retain control, to continue living as they want, without surrendering to the system that tells them they have no choice? The one question. Before you move into a nursing home, ask yourself, is this the life I want to live for my final years, or is there a better way to preserve my independence and dignity? That question hangs in the air, doesn't it? You've been told time and time again that aging means giving up certain things. Your body starts to slow down. Things become more difficult, and you find yourself needing help. The idea of a nursing home starts to seem like the only solution. It's a place where you'll be taken care of, right? They'll handle the things you can no longer do. But is that the only way? Is it really the answer to your needs, your wishes, and your dignity? For Helen, it wasn't an easy question to ask. She was sitting quietly, surrounded by the memories of her life. Photos on the walls, keepsakes from her children, and the comfort of her home. She saw these things every day, and they filled her with warmth. But today, those memories felt like they were slipping through her fingers. Her body was no longer as reliable as it used to be. The thought of moving to a nursing home had crossed her mind more than once. She looked at the photo of her grandchildren, and the idea seemed even harder to face. Was this the life she had worked so hard to build? Or was there a different way to live out her years? The question echoed louder. Is this the life I want to live for my final years, or is there a better way? Helen sat back, pondering. Could she still maintain her independence? Could she still live on her own terms? She didn't want to be a burden to anyone. But the thought of being confined to a nursing home, where her choices would be taken away, felt wrong. The answer wasn't clear yet, but something inside her told her that there was more to aging than just giving up control. Helen wasn't the only one thinking about this. John, Sarah, and Eleanor were also grappling with their own fears, their own questions. They all wondered, is there another way? Aging didn't have to mean surrendering to the system. More they realized, aging in place might be the answer. Helen decided to adapt her home rather than give up her independence. She didn't want to leave the place she loved, the place she had called home for so many years. The idea of a nursing home wasn't something she was ready to face. But she also knew she needed help with certain things that had become harder for her to do on her own. So, she started thinking about how she could change things. Small changes. Simple adjustments. Things that would help her stay independent, while also making her home safer and easier to navigate. Helen called a local company and had safety rails installed in her bathroom. She added non-slip mats to prevent any slips in the shower. She even set up an emergency alert system that would give her peace of mind. John, on the other hand, was starting to face a different kind of challenge. At 80, he was physically weaker, but his stubbornness was still as strong as ever. He didn't want to go into a nursing home. He couldn't imagine it. But he also knew he needed help. After some thought, he decided to hire someone to assist with some of the daily tasks. He didn't want to lose control of his life, but he also didn't want to keep pushing himself too hard. John reached out to a caregiver service. He started setting up a weekly schedule so he could get the help he needed without losing his sense of independence. He felt good about it. He was still in control of his choices, still making decisions about his life. It wasn't perfect, but it worked for him. Then there was Sarah. At 78, she felt isolated. Her children lived far away, and though they kept in touch, the distance was hard to bear. The loneliness was heavy. She missed having family close by. The idea of moving into a nursing home seemed like a solution, but not one she wanted. She wanted to stay at home. She wanted to feel connected to the world. So Sarah started looking for ways to stay engaged. She began joining community support groups. She found local groups for seniors that met regularly. She even joined online groups where she could talk to people her age, share stories, and offer advice. These connections helped her feel less alone. Sarah wasn't ready to give up her independence, but she knew that staying isolated wasn't the answer. And then there was Eleanor. At 72, she was full of energy and drive, but the pressure to keep up with the younger generation was starting to wear on her. She was tech-savvy, sure, but even technology had its limitations. She didn't want to lose touch with the world, but she also didn't want to be treated like she was irrelevant. Eleanor started looking into remote caregiving services. She found solutions that allowed her to maintain her independence while getting the help she needed. She explored new technologies and began using assistive devices to help her with daily tasks. Eleanor even looked into telemedicine so that she could keep up with her health care from the comfort of her home. It wasn't easy, but it allowed her to stay in charge of her life and her well-being. All of them were finding their own ways to adjust. Aging in place was more than just a buzzword. It was a lifestyle. It meant making changes, yes, but also keeping the core of what mattered, freedom and independence. Aging in place wasn't just about physical changes. It was about staying connected, whether through technology, community, or simply maintaining relationships. For Helen, the connections with her family were everything. She didn't want to be separated from her children and grandchildren. So, she started using video calls. It was a small step, but it made a huge difference. She could see their faces, hear their voices, and feel like they were there with her, even when they weren't physically present. Sarah, too, began to reconnect with people. She learned to use social media and found groups for seniors that shared her interests. She could interact with others who were going through the same things, share experiences, and make new friends. The feeling of being part of something bigger than just her own thoughts helped lift her spirits. For John, social engagement came in the form of a local senior social club. He started attending weekly meetings, where he could meet people, chat, and stay active. It was a simple solution, but it kept him engaged with the world. He didn't feel like he was fading into the background. Instead, he felt like he was still a part of his community. Eleanor, being as tech-savvy as she was, embraced virtual cooking classes. She didn't just sit back and let the world pass her by. She shared her love of cooking with family and friends online. She could teach them her favorite recipes and connect with them in a way that felt both meaningful and exciting. Staying connected, whether it was through family calls, social groups, or virtual activities, kept them engaged and emotionally fulfilled. It didn't matter how old they were, they had the ability to stay part of the world, no matter where they lived. Aging doesn't mean stopping. It doesn't mean giving up on the things you love or the things that matter. For John, it was all about adapting. He started using assistive devices to manage his health and mobility. At first, he resisted. He didn't want to feel weak or dependent. But as time passed, he realized that these tools weren't a sign of weakness, they were just part of how he could keep doing the things he loved. He could still care for his garden, even if it meant using a walker. He didn't have to stop living just because his body was changing. Eleanor, too, found ways to adjust. She didn't stop being active, she just found new ways to stay fit and healthy. She incorporated physical activity and meditation into her daily routine. She made time for creative hobbies, and they gave her energy. Eleanor knew that aging didn't have to mean slowing down. It was about finding new ways to engage with life. Helen, though she was physically slower, found ways to reclaim the things she loved. She couldn't garden the way she once had, but she still tended to her plants. She downscaled, yes, but she still felt connected to the earth. She found simpler ways to stay active, taking short walks, doing light stretches. It wasn't about pushing herself too hard, it was about staying engaged with life, even in small ways. The key message was clear: aging doesn't mean stopping. It's about adapting. And small changes can make a huge difference in maintaining independence while respecting the limits that come with aging. Aging doesn't just affect your body, it touches your mind, too. Sarah found that simply going through the motions of daily life wasn't enough. She needed to take care of her emotional health, just as she cared for her physical health. She found a local therapy group for seniors and began attending sessions. For the first time in years, she felt like she was truly heard. The therapist helped her unpack her feelings of loneliness, fear, and grief. She was no longer carrying the weight of those emotions alone. In the therapy room, she felt a sense of release, like a burden she didn't even know she was carrying was lifted off her shoulders. In addition to therapy, Sarah joined a mindfulness class for seniors. It wasn't easy at first. Her mind would often wander, and old habits would pull her back into negative thinking. But with time, the practice of mindfulness helped Sarah understand her feelings. She learned to stay present, to focus on the small joys in her day, and to release the weight of loneliness that had been so overwhelming. Helen, too, found emotional support. She joined a local grief group for seniors, a place where people came together to talk about the losses they'd experienced. It wasn't just a place for sharing sorrow, it was a space for connection. Helen was no longer alone with her grief. She shared stories with others who understood exactly what she was going through. The group meetings gave her the strength to process her fears and to understand that aging wasn't just about loss, it was also about finding new ways to hold on to what mattered. John had his own struggles, but he knew he needed help. He started seeing a counselor to work through his frustrations. The changes in his life, the loss of physical strength, the need for assistance, left him feeling helpless at times. But his counselor helped him process those feelings of loss. It wasn't just about his body, it was about accepting the changes in his life and understanding that needing help didn't mean he was weak. John learned to be kind to himself. He wasn't alone in this journey, and he didn't need to carry the weight of it all by himself. Eleanor, who had been so focused on staying young and active, found herself feeling the emotional weight of aging. But rather than retreating into frustration, she decided to embrace mindfulness. Every morning, she sat down with a journal and reflected on her day, her thoughts, her feelings. It wasn't always easy. There were days when her mind felt too crowded with worry, but through writing and meditation, she found a way to bring clarity. The mindfulness exercises helped her cope with the emotional pressures of aging, and the journal gave her a space to process her experiences. She realized that aging wasn't something to fight against, it was a journey to be understood and embraced. The decisions these four individuals made marked a turning point in their lives. For Helen, the answer was clear. She wasn't ready to give up her home, her memories, her life. She chose to stay in her own space, adapting it to fit her changing needs. She had safety rails installed in the bathroom and a non-slip mat in the kitchen. Small changes, but they made all the difference. She was still in control of her life. It wasn't about ignoring the challenges. It was about finding ways to work with them. Helen wasn't letting age define her choices. She was still making her own decisions, on her terms. John also decided to take control of his life, but in a different way. He knew that he couldn't keep going without help. The thought of a nursing home still filled him with dread, but he wasn't about to let pride stop him from living well. He agreed to have a home health aide assist him. But the most important part? He kept control over his daily routine. He set the schedule. He decided when to ask for help and when to do things on his own. The aide was there to make life easier, not to take over. John realized that asking for help didn't mean giving up. It meant adapting, finding balance, and keeping the independence that mattered to him. Sarah embraced new technologies that helped her stay connected. She knew she couldn't live in isolation anymore, so she took action. She learned to use social media, connecting with others online. She joined community groups for seniors, finding a sense of belonging in a world that had once felt so distant. She found that the internet wasn't just for younger people, it was a tool that could help her build new relationships and stay in touch with her family. Sarah wasn't letting loneliness dictate her life. She was taking control of her connections, both old and new. For Eleanor, the decision was a matter of balance. She didn't have to choose between staying active and engaging with the world. She embraced technology without losing touch with real-world experiences. She continued to teach virtual cooking classes, staying connected to family and friends. But she also made sure to spend time outside, attending social events, and participating in activities that kept her physically and emotionally engaged. Eleanor found peace in balancing both worlds, technology and real-world connections, and she thrived in the process. The message is clear: aging doesn't have to mean giving up your autonomy. You don't have to lose control over your life. These decisions, big and small, showed that you can still make choices that allow you to live on your terms. Aging isn't about retreating from life, it's about finding new ways to stay engaged, stay active, and stay in control. It's about taking charge of your own journey, no matter what obstacles you face. Aging doesn't have to mean losing your freedom. It doesn't have to mean surrendering to the idea that your best years are behind you. It doesn't have to mean giving up your choices, your independence, or your dignity. You have the power to create the future you want. And it starts with taking control today. Helen, John, Sarah, and Eleanor all proved that aging doesn't have to limit your life. They showed us that the journey doesn't have to be about giving up, it's about embracing change and finding new ways to live fully. They all decided to take control in their own ways, and so can you. You don't have to wait until it's too late. You don't have to follow the conventional path. You have the right to choose how you live your final years, and that choice is in your hands. So, what path will you choose? Will you embrace your independence and live life on your terms, or will you let others decide for you? Think about your future. What changes are you willing to make to keep control over your life? Remember, the best part of aging is the wisdom, independence, and joy you carry with you. Let's redefine what it means to age. The power to shape your future lies within you. Like, subscribe, and share if you believe we all deserve to age with dignity and independence.